Antonio, thank you very much for having accepted this conversation. Firstly, I want to mention that it might sound a bit strange that being in Portugal and all the two of us are Portuguese speaking in English. Anyhow, the reason is that we all have several contacts, international contacts, and I have lots of also foreign friends, and I believe that even the Portuguese that are in the target will also, they all speak English, so it won't be a problem. Anyhow, it might be the first time you are being interviewed in Portugal by a Portuguese in English.
No problem. Thank you for asking. It's a pleasure.
Okay, just to give you a bit of your background for someone that might not know you, which might be difficult, but anyhow, Antonio is the Executive Vice President of Unilever. I'm sorry, I think I will, if I say something wrong, please correct me. You're also CEO of Unilever FEMA, CEO of Gallo Worldwide. Antonio has a Bachelor of Science in Economy by the London School of Economics and an MBA by the Universidade Nova de Lisboa, and also an advanced program, managed program by Harvard. He was CEO of a mobile operator in Portugal, Optimus, and member of the board of executive directors of Sonaicom and Sonai Sierra. He had also a consultancy job at McKinsey. He has also been non-executive member of Público newspaper and the supervisory board of Eurocash, the main distribution chain in Poland. He's a member of the supervision council of the digital newspaper Observador and of the fiscal council of the not-for-profit foundation Make-A-Wish. Okay, hope it was right. So, okay, it's a pleasure to be with you. I have some questions. And to begin with, we have been talking practically since the existence of marketing, that the customer is at the center of all marketing strategies. Apparently, after more than 50 years, it looks like that it's not really what happens to a huge number of companies and brands. What do you think about it? How does Unilever behave in this arena?
Well, I think there's two different realities. One is the customer it's still to us pretty much at the center of all our thoughts and at the center of our brand strategy. So our product strategy, our brand strategy, our marketing strategy is customer-centric, is consumer-centric. We still want to put the consumer at the heart of everything we do. Two things have changed. One is the way we approach consumers. So in the end, in the old days, you used to have these functional benefits and these emotional benefits. And these days, what you consider emotional benefits are wider than they were in the old days. Sure. And there is a lot of new angles that bring about consumer benefits, and purpose, which I'm sure we'll talk about plenty today, is one of those multiple angles that you look at the consumer with. The second thing is that the company has become more multi-stakeholder in its logic. Okay? In the old days, you had the company which was mainly concentrated on the consumer, then on its customer, and on the shareholders. And now you've got the company concerned not only with these aspects of the overall business system, but with a lot more angles. You know, very concerned with the communities it is inserted in. So where the factories are, where your head offices are, where your consumers are. So you take into account many more stakeholders than you did 50 years ago. So I think there's two logics. Consumer is still at the center, but now you look at the consumer from many or more angles. Second, we are concerned with more, as a company, we are concerned with more stakeholders than we were even 30 or 40 years ago. It's not only the consumer and the shareholder, but it's the consumer, the shareholder, our suppliers, our business partners, our investors, the planet, society. There's a lot more angles around it.
Yes, I was going to ask you another question, which actually it's linked to what you've been saying, is that today we started to talk about stakeholder capitalism, about conscious capitalism, about those. It's curious because this emerged from the most traditional, let's say, Chicago followers. For instance, Philip Kotler and other followers talk today about this, which is really perhaps one we weren't expecting it. But in this way, some companies, as Unilever, have been pursuing an objective of helping to achieve a better world, so to speak, and putting in place a policy of brand activism, as we call it nowadays. Can you expand a bit on this about Unilever?
Yes, no, it's you're completely right. So I think recently we are all more following this logic of the company role in society is larger than we thought in the past. Mm-hmm. And the way the companies impact society can be wider than it's in the past. And I think if somebody frames this logic very well is a Harvard professor, which is Rebecca Anderson. So that she follows this logic that capitalism is more than a system, is a machine for innovation. Capitalism is the market society, if you want to call it by another name, is the most efficient way to deliver against an objective. Okay, the world has not found a better way to deliver against any objective than through markets. Okay, there was this incredible failure of all the planned economies. Okay, and we've all come to the conclusion over the last 20, 30 years that the markets are the most efficient at allocating resources. Till very recently, markets were concerned basically with delivering against the capital that companies employ. So markets were very good at increasing the return on capital because capital was still very recently the major concern. The capital across the world was a scarce resource, and what you asked everybody to do is to optimize against your scarce resource, which was capital. Okay? Of course, I'm simplifying the thought, but as a general idea. These days, capital is no longer as a scarce resource as it was. Second, other resources which were thought as endless have come to the front as scarce resources, namely the planet or parts of the planet. Thus, you must optimize against this. You must optimize by using as little or nothing of the scarce resources as you can. Okay? But still the best way to address this is capitalism, is the market system. Okay? The market system is the system that optimizes against any resources. Now, the other logic is also been that companies are better at more efficient machines than government or other institutions. For instance, take an example which is very close at hand: plastics. I mean, there is a huge and probably justified uproar with plastics and the abundance of plastics. There is not a single law yet against plastics, nothing. But all the big companies have already declared very strict objectives for plastic reduction on the next 2, 3, 4 years. Okay. That is true with plastics, with sugar, with salt, with fat content. All of the big companies declared big objectives of reduction against anything that they saw was of questionable use when basically data came available that showed that some ingredients were questionable. Companies were much quicker to define objectives and to reduce them than any law that came about to reduce them, but by a factor of 3, 4, 6 years. Okay, so companies are much quicker at adapting, much quicker, by the by, much quicker at organizing between themselves objectives, much quicker at delivering against those objectives than any other known system, namely governments. Okay, and they are much more apt at organizing themselves transnationally than governments are. Okay, because just the sheer discussion between several governments of what should be targets or not targets usually takes much longer than it takes for companies to organize and deliver, organize and set targets. So, one. Yes, you're right. This new phase of brand activism, it's basically happening, and it's happening because companies have realized they've got a much bigger footprint in the world than they thought in the past. Second, that they're much more apt at delivering against objectives than any other system, and that they function on this capitalism system, on this market system, which has been the most efficient system known to man to deliver against objectives. And this logic makes it that companies now are having a clout that probably they didn't have till very recently. Also, they're becoming much bigger, by the by. So they're having much bigger clout than they have in the past. The other thing which is, I think, worth mentioning is that companies, this new logic of companies and purpose and how companies go about it, which is probably a momentum built on the last decade. Okay, one. It's been very well recognized and made a virtuous circle with society. I mean, in the sense that society has welcomed this new logic of companies, and because of that, companies themselves have developed this logic more and more. I mean, if it had been a dead end where shareholders did not want companies to go about it this way, if consumers did not recognize. If consumers told you a soap is a soap is a soap, I don't care if my soap saves the world, I just would care if my soap washes. If this logic had not found a good place in consumer hearts and in the society, it will probably not have been abandoned. It will probably have been abandoned. But what happened was that this logic became part of a virtuous circle. Consumers were very happy that companies took this role and that brands took this role. And of course, companies responded to that by being more and more ambitious on the role they took. In Unilever, it's very clear. Now, our logic is companies with purpose last. So companies must be regarded by society as being beneficial to society. Companies that are not recognized as beneficial to society will disappear at some point in time, or sooner than the ones that society recognizes as beneficial. In a company of our type, in order for a company to have a purpose and for that purpose to be impactful, it's through our brands. So our brands must have purposes, which is basically the way we interact with society, or the biggest way we interact with society. For that to happen, our people must have purpose as well, because you cannot imagine a company with purpose and brands with purpose, but that the people that work on it don't have purpose, and it just doesn't work. So people must have purpose for the brands to have purpose, and brands have purpose because that's the way for the company to have purpose. So that's Unilever logics. Brands with purpose last, companies with purpose last, brands with the purpose grow, people with purpose thrive. Okay, that's our three-legged approach to purpose these days.
Yes, because we can say that brands that will succeed in the future are the ones that, well, since ever, are the ones that really understand the customer. And in a way, it's curious because I recently saw a research from Bain & Company. It was done 2019, 2020. And it's curious because they have interviewed, I don't know how, I don't know the technical, which were the countries, but it was all over the world, CEOs from all over the world and CMOs. And they came to the conclusion that 80%, I don't know if you have heard this, which is rather strange for it's not so comfortable for a CEO or CMO, but 80% of them said they provided good experience, more than good, that they provided in the interaction great experience to their customers. But at the same time, only 8% of their customers really said they have had good experiences with the company. So it might sound a little strange, and perhaps we marketers, so to speak, should take this into account, because at the end of the day, we might think that we are doing a good job, and perhaps it might not be so good as we thought it was.
Yes, it's easy for ourselves to over-evaluate our impact, to overestimate the impact we have, yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Unilever is in a way a B2B company. Therefore, retailers are the main customers. Okay, the final customer is really the customer, but anyhow. But how does a company like Unilever, in so many categories and so many brands, reinforce the relationship with the final customers?
Well, basically, we have high regard for all the people between ourselves and the final consumer, but we are keenly aware that as a company we are a brands company, okay? And our objective is to serve consumers delivering high quality products. There is never a doubt about this. So we are about the consumer, the end consumer, delivering, taking into account all the system to get there, but about satisfying the end consumer. Okay? So in that sense, we take retailers and distributor chains and the channels in our logic, and of course we want to build reinforced relationships with them, but always more concerned with the way we reach the consumer. Okay? And in that sense, the logic these days is a logic of brand say and brand do. So what the brands communicate, what they say to the consumer, and what at the end of the day they also do, not only on the way they perform in the final moment where they're consumed, but also if the logic of what they advertise is a logic that they follow on the way they are designed, built, manufactured, and delivered. Okay, for instance, if you're a tea brand, where are your plantations? How are people that work on the plantations treated? What is the wage you play on? What is the wage you play on to your employees in the plantations? If the price at which you buy your product is enough to warrant to the small planters or to the small plantations a decent living wage. Okay, so the brands must all along the chain be concerned that what they do is consistent with what they say. Okay, and this logic must be always present. It is you will not want a brand that does not, somewhere along the business system, that will not deliver against its logic. Okay, for instance, a brand that to function you could only wash clothes at 80 degrees, when you know that 80 degrees has a huge impact on the as a huge ecological footprint because of warming the water, using a lot of water, etc. Okay, so and you could say, oh, it's nothing to do with me because my brand, it's the problem is not with my brand. Well, it is, because consumers want your brand to be responsible for all the elements it touches along its life.
Yeah, but at the same time, it seems like a paradox because most brands and most companies have been investing all along their activity in trying to get loyalty from their customers. But at the end of the day, all research that has been made let us come to the conclusion that people are each time and less loyal to the brands.
Yes, I can understand that reasoning. At the end of the day, loyalty is overall share. Okay. So, you know, it's out of 100 times brands are bought, how many times your brand is bought? And if you look at share, the share of the big brands has not decreased overall in the last decade. What's happened? I mean, here and there, yes, but generically across categories, big brands, the share has not decreased. What has decreased is the share of medium and small brands. Okay. So if you look at the biggest brands per category, loyalty has increased because share has increased. What's been really squeezed is middle and small brands, and those have been squeezed out of most markets, and in that sense, loyalty to those brands has decreased significantly. Okay? But for the big brands, so if you want, the phenomenon has been big brands loyalty has increased, small and medium brands small loyalty has decreased. Okay, and of course this has got consequences. I mean, but it's not, the system is a system like that because one, distribution in fast-moving consumer goods also does not want as many brands that it had in the past. Okay. They want less and less brands, so they've been squeezing middle brands out. It's been more and more expensive to communicate if you're a middle-sized brand. Okay. Now, with the digital communication, not completely true, but for a long time, big brands, of course, had a big advantage over small and medium brands at the time of communication. They also had a big, of course, they also had a big advantage in innovation, in the ability to innovate and to see their innovation distributed. So truly, it's been a squeeze of the middle side of the system, once by the big brands and second by the private labels. It's not completely true because you could find many examples where this has not happened. But overall, if you look at the big amount, at a lot of categories, loyalty has increased for the big brands, has decreased for the small brands. Okay, that has been the logic more present on the last, I think, last 10, 20 years.
Okay. Talking a bit about digital transformation, I have been existed in, well, there was some CEO from a company, I don't remember, a Portuguese one, but said that more than 60% of the digital transformation processes in Portugal don't really come to an efficient solution, so to speak, because what's been happening sometimes, perhaps not in bigger companies, but is that what's happening now to the digital transformation is a bit what happened some 30 or 40 years ago when computers started and companies started to automatize the processes they made in the past without changing anything. At least I believe that to succeed, digital transformation has to take into account, say, to review all the process of the value chain from the company to the customer, and not only putting online, so to speak, putting online what we did in the past offline. Apparently, some companies do it. Of course, Unilever doesn't do it. But how these processes came in your company?
Well, I think, you're completely right. So it's this digital transformation is not about using the same processes and just digitalizing what you used to do before. You've got a lot of different angles on this. One, of course, one very obvious one on the digital process is e-commerce. Okay? Mm-hmm. And the way e-commerce has increased immensely on the last, on the crisis we are still living today, and that digital approach to commerce that has exploded recently. In Portugal, less so than in other countries, because also in Portugal there are no truly pure plays on the digital commerce, okay? And pure plays seem to be helpful for the market to increase significantly. When only the traditional retailers go about going digital, mm-hmm. they tend to go more slowly, or the market tends to go digital more slowly than when you've got dedicated digital players with no shops, and that tends to create a bigger reaction of the traditional players than when there is no pure play in the market. And we, as you know, don't have any pure play in the market. Okay? But today a pure play will come, like Ocado or Amazon, or a dedicated pure play. I think we'll see our market exploding even more. So you've got all that has been happening recently. Just take three logics. The second one, of course, on this digital, you've got some business models which are digital only. We've got things like the Dollar Shave Club, which we've acquired. Yeah. That's a subscription based model, which is basically only possible on this era. You've got other things like Ice Cream Now, which is also based on Deliveroo and Glovo and the Uber Eats, which are another way of reaching your channels, your consumer, that is only possible in this day and age. So you've got all these switches channels. You've got another one, which of course is the way you impact your consumer on what was previously just TV, outdoors, etc. And now you must reach them also through social networks, and whenever they are on their screens, which are not only TV screens, but mobile, more and more mobile, but of course tablets, laptops, etc. So basically, it's been the ever-present fight for eyeballs, to be where your consumer has a chance of seeing you. Of course, what you must do in each of these, the assets you must use in each media are very, very different. And the initial habit of picking up your TV ad and showing your TV ad on a mobile or on a laptop, that's gone. That is now you realize that sound is much less important. The length must be much shorter for it to be acceptable. So there's a full new logic how to advertise. But I think it has been sizable. The impact has been sizable, not only on how we spend our resources, so how much money we spend on talking to our consumers on a digital media than it was before. And Portugal, by the by, is quite small by comparison, for instance, with UK or the US, where more than half of the advertising is already non-traditional media. In Portugal, it's still small, but Google is bigger than the public television, for instance. And Facebook must be getting very close to that one in the overall advertising money spent.
Well, when you talk about Dollar Shave Company, I was I was thinking on that example when you start talking. But what happens is, okay, a big company can only acquire well, to go on other fields that it isn't at the moment, or eventually if it think it has been or it will be a competition that it can't compete. But what seems to me is that the new companies, new ventures like Dollar Shave and others are a bit more. I don't know if the paradigm has. I think the paradigm has changed in the. If I may explain you, for decades we say, okay, a big company has the power to innovate and to do more, to do different from the competition. But apparently, and technology, of course, helps this that new small ventures like Dollar Shave and others, small ideas, so to speak, have developed and now are in a way are competitors or compete with big companies. Okay, the solution can be to buy them, but at the same time, it seems that the larger structures aren't flexible and agile enough to compete with the new ventures. What do you think?
I think you're right, Carlos. And I think probably a solution I particularly like is to acquire the up-and-coming ventures when they become sizable. And I think that is often a better way to grow than to try and develop internally solutions that are far away from the business model that your company knows. I mean, to do internally a Dollar Shave Club, to me, is practically impossible. Practically impossible. It's so far away from your logic, so far away from your know-how, so against what you most of what you believe, that it will very likely fail. Okay. However, if a business model like that comes up, okay, your ability to buy them and then to explode it, make it much quicker in rollout than anybody else could, is very appreciated. So I, for one, don't think big companies are very apt at innovating very far away from their core. Okay, we are good at innovating at the fringes. Okay? You've got a chocolate ice cream, now you go into a fruit ice cream. Next year you go into whatever, organic fruit ice cream. That's okay. But you know, you don't go from being an ice cream company into being a jelly bean company. That is already something that you don't.
Big companies have more difficult to disrupt what they used to do because they are used to it. It's proved,
and they are good at it. And there's a lot to do with innovating at the fringes. Yeah. But big jumps, you better. My personal opinion has always been that if it's a big jump, you'd better buy outside.
Okay, I have two more questions. Sorry, I have two more questions. We could be talking about all day, but okay. Just to summarize, one is linked with you have talked about the private level, the brands, and in a way we could say that your main distributors, as brand producers, as having your own brands, your distributors are your main competitors, so to speak. How do you manage that relation?
Well, I think, it also has changed a lot over time. Okay, I think over time, what's been happening is that the private labels have taken over the low price tiers, the bottom of the market. And the A brands have taken over the top of the market. Okay? So all that was the low price segments you know, if I'm generalizing, and of course, you know, one should always be careful, because you could always find lots of examples of things that are not like this. So I'm generalizing. But over time, what has happened is the low price tier has taken over what is the low end of the market, the most generic categories, the most generic, the most traditional flavors, ways of doing business, whatever, formats, presentations, that has been generalized. And of course, brand manufacturers lost that bit of the market to them. But on the other hand, they were never able to penetrate the high price tiers. And thus all that is innovation, more sophisticated products, more difficult presentations, specialist formats, flavors, whatever, smells, whatever you want. That has always been the preserve of the brand manufacturers, and also the high margin area, the area of big margins. Okay, so and in that sense, also recently, and especially in recessions, what you have is an area of a squeeze in the middle. People go either for low price tiers, or they tend to go for more sophisticated products. Okay, and that depends from category to category. You can buy, I'm giving you an example, you can buy DOB toilet napkins, and then you go and buy an expensive mustard. And other people which don't care about mustard go and buy cheap mustard and expensive toilet napkins. So people, you know, it's not everybody that is one price tier or the other price tier. You go around in categories doing one and other thing according to your own preferences. But the low price tier has become the province of the private labels, and the high price tiers has become the province of a brand manufacturer. Everything in the middle has been squeezed. Of course, a brand manufacturers once in a while launch offensives into the low price tier, mostly to promotions. Okay, so you start heavily promoting a category, and that is the way, usually the way where you go into where you try and advance into the low price tier is when you start promoting a category heavily. Of course, some categories, the low price tier the DOBs never entered. Shampoos, many personal beauty and personal care categories, some food categories, DOBs were never of relevance. Okay, others became very important in others. So it also depends heavily on the amount of innovation that categories have. Okay, if it's a category with high level of innovation, DOBs tend to be smaller. If it's a category with low level of innovation, DOBs tend to be higher.
Okay. Well, and a final question: in your opinion, what next? As far as the main challenges are concerned, I wouldn't say for marketing. I would say, as you are CEO of a brand company, marketing is, I think it's in your blood. What are the main challenges for the next future for a big corporation like yours?
Well, I think for a company like Unilever, truly, if we've got one objective which is not basically a financial objective, I think we want to be seen and regarded as as a guiding light, as a forefront of this transformation of companies into the front guard of sustainability, of fighting for the causes that overall most people in the world agree that are needed. And those, of course, is sustainability, but also these days, inclusiveness. And I'm sure you've seen there's now a big logic of Unilever becoming a more and more inclusive company, inside the company, the way that we deal with the outside world. Okay, making sure that we buy a lot from small businesses, making sure we pay across the system always what is called a minimum living wage, so that we pay a wage big enough that two people can live decently on it. So try and make sure that the world becomes a more inclusive place, and try to make sure that companies become sustainable. Meaning, at the end of the day, what you would want is that the world will be a better place because your company exists. Okay, and that the existence of companies is seen as transforming the world into a better place because of the practices that you have when you manufacture it, when you buy raw materials, when you manufacture, when you distribute, and because of the practices you've got along your business. Okay, that because of you, the world is a better place, and that people, whether or not buy your products, hopefully when they buy your products, they buy them also knowing that the products do what they do, but also that company has got society as a main stakeholder when doing business. And if all companies do this, or if most of the big companies do this, and I'm completely sure this is a concern of many of the big companies. I mean, corporate governance, for God's sake. Corporate governance started being a practice first by the big companies before it was a practice anywhere else. Okay? Even in governments, as we found out.
Sure.
So all these ideas stem from the big companies, and we've got a major. I think all big companies have got a major role to play in transforming the world. So I think if you say, where is our future? This, make the world a better place.
Okay, this is a magnific way to end our talk. Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you, Carlos, for the invitation.
With
pleasure.
All the best. All the best.